Years ago, when in Rome, before ordination, I was in class with about 200 others in the Angelicum, and we had before us Father Paul Murray, a well-known Dominican, and he insisted that the whole of spirituality could be found in the first epistle of St. John, that epistle that we are reading now in this week following Christmas, and there is a reason for its choice. St. John, both in the epistles and in the Gospel, is the one who shares with us the fruits of deep meditation on the Word, and he also insists that the Word had become palpable and that they had touched him with their hands. He knows what he's talking about. Their eyes have seen the one that actually is God. Now remember, if you are before a man, your reaction is to react to a man. But they were seeing and understanding. And that also had been the experience of only 3 of them when they saw already the glorified Christ on Mount Tabor. So they knew a bit more than the others already. And that, by the way, applies to us. For even though in the sacramental realm we only see precisely the, as it were, flesh, the visible appearance, we need the eyes of faith to look beyond and see that that same power of Tabor is there, and that Godhead is looking at us even from the host. That is being lost in our time, and one of the reasons which helps it to be lost is that precisely the face of the Lord is being made ugly. In practice, take away from the splendour of beauty, the splendour of holiness in the cult, the worship of the Lord, then also our faith suffers. I remember way back doing a course under Father Colin Kilcoyle, who recently died, and he warned us, good faith, or rather good liturgy, enhances faith. Bad liturgy diminishes faith. And so it is not indifferent that in certain parts of the Church's life, certain areas more than others, we see that faith has been weakened also by shoddy praise of majesty. But I want to zoom into another side of this apostle spirituality, and it's the one that comes out already in this reading that we have had. He insists that there is an illusion, a complete illusion in the spirituality and spiritual life of any human being who thinks he is doing service to God and is harbouring some kind of grudge, or worse still, hatred in his heart. And he makes a parallel. How can one love God whom one has not seen when one hates the person right before one who can see very well? One can't be charitable, in inverted commas, to those in the darkest parts of the world through helping them through a bank account, and be thoroughly uncharitable to the person right next to us, because the person right next to us happens to be Jesus in that person right next to us, because he also disguises himself in that person's flesh. I see a picture actually in the room where I was vesting of Mother Teresa, whom actually I had known, because when I was in school she came to our huge parish in Cardiff. We were sitting on the floor before us, we school boys and girls, and she spoke to us as a kind mother. She's now a saint of the church, but she did insist in her teaching of her spirituality of this element of adoring the Lord present in the poorest of the poor, and that these poor bits of cast out humanity were to be handled with the same reverence as the priest exercises towards the sacred species of the altar, because it's the same Christ disguised. Remember that before raising your voice. That especially is true in those who are living together all the time. In marriage, it's quite heroic to go from the day of marriage, when one contracts to love and to cherish, and that means a lot, throughout life until death without explosions or anything unpleasant. And yet there's no need for explosions and things unpleasant. Normally, if one is living in the presence of God, especially in a Christian marriage, where there is Trinitarian life passing, that should not happen. I remember talking years ago to a neighbour of mine, just a few doors away from me in the Hermitage. She had lost her husband not long previously, and actually the name of their house is a typical example, because they put two parts of their names in to make one name of the house. And somebody had asked her after the death of her husband, did you ever have a cross word? And honestly, she looked back and said, I don't think so, if I recall. It was a completely harmonious marriage. And that's not really surprising. They loved each other and they didn't want to hurt each other. Why bring in other dynamics which participate in the dynamics of the other guy? And it's important also in community, because in a monastery we're in a goldfish bowl, and one has to behave well to the goldfish that one is bumping into 24/7. It's the same life and we'll be there, but those acts of hidden charity make all the difference. I'm not being told this actually in formation. We're not here to support each other, supporter l'un l'autre, mais s'aimer, but to love one another, and it's a very different dynamic. And it can happen. I remember actually hearing this when at La Trappe, Frère Hugues, when I was abbot in another house, like Notre-Dame-des-Neiges, and he said in one of our Lectio Divina together, we used to have certain moments of sharing in the novitiate, and he did say this, that it had hit him, and he entered, he was only 20 when he entered, and he was very fresh and aware, and he said, des fois, on sent qu'on est très unis. Sometimes one feels that one is very much united. And he was referring to the choir, when in choir, big monastery there, that the brethren were intensely united, he felt, and sometimes, and he could feel it in the air. Now, that was good community life. I remember actually one Christmas, because he didn't speak, but therefore gestures were important. And Frère Armand, who's a young novice, came up to me and gave me a massive squeeze. I couldn't talk a lot, but I thought, there is charity here. Ici, il y a l'amour, there is love in this community. And that was the expression of what we were living. And how could it be otherwise if one is living all the time on the Trinity, with that divine life, sharing the bread of life, sharing and living for glory? If that is not the case, then there is a cancer, either in the family or in the community, or indeed in a prayer group. It's the same thing but different. Unforgiveness, grudges. So St. John goes into this and is very concrete. We know actually from evidence from the time that he insisted all his life on this. One day, we have this from the pen of St. Polycarp. This happened. He had been a young man when St. John was an old man. So we're here in what we call the Apostolic Fathers, the first generation after. And he reported how he had known in the assemblies there, when the elder St. John was present, he would be in prayer, and at the end they would ask for a word. He would get up, or maybe he wouldn't at the end, just sit down, and he would say this: little children, love one another. The following Sunday he'd give a word again: little children, love one another. So as time went by, he really got somewhat, as we would say, cheesed off about this. This is just too repetitive. And they approached him, "Reverend Father, why do you always say the same thing?" And he replied, "It was only this that the Lord asked for, and were it done, it would be